Upon a Time in Hollywood is the 9th movie written and directed by Quentin Tarantino. This one starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Brad Pitt, and Margot Robbie. I was absolutely amped for this movie going into it. Quentin Tarantino is my favorite director of all time. He's also probably my favorite writer of all time. Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio, two of my favorite actors in the business. Leo DiCaprio being my favorite actor in the business. Margot Robbie, I'm also a huge fan of hers. This just has a great cast. It's showed a lot of promise. And as someone who just loves Quentin Tarantino's movies, I was really excited to see what this movie was going to have to offer. I've said this before, Quentin Tarantino and Christopher Nolan, they're probably the only directors out there who haven't made a movie that I hated. At the very least, I've enjoyed every Tarantino movie that I've seen. Going into this movie though, I did hear a bit of a mixed response from the people who did see it. I saw some people say it was Quentin Tarantino's masterpiece. I've seen some people say it's not quite up there with some of his best work. It's actually, arguably, according to some people, one of his worst movies. So I was looking forward to seeing it for myself so I could finally figure out where I felt it stood among his other work. I'll start off my review by saying this. Is the movie great? Yes, it's awesome and I did love it. But it wasn't without its flaws. So as the title of this movie suggests, this movie takes place in Hollywood sometime around the late 60s. DiCaprio plays this actor named Rick Dalton. Brad Pitt plays his stunt double and longtime friend Cliff Booth. And Leonardo DiCaprio has currently reached a point in his career where he's kind of starting to feel like he's washed up, starting to feel like a has-been. He was a part of this very successful TV show for a long time. He was in a few big movies. Since then, though, he's kind of been used differently as an actor. Ever since he started the really successful TV show that he was in and being in a few good movies, since then, he's kind of just become a one-dimensional actor. He's frequently being casted as a villain, as an antagonist, you know, basically for a lot of these movies that he has been in. He wants to do more than that. He wants to see himself branch out. He wants to become more of an actor. He wants to make more of a name for himself again. Cliff Booth has also done a lot of work with Rick Dalton because he's been his stunt double for a long time. They develop a really strong friendship for each other. And what I like seeing in Cliff Booth is he's had an interesting career too. I mean, his whole life he's just been a stunt double, which he's been fine with. But because of a conspiracy surrounding him and his wife's death, he was at one point believed to have murdered her, but there was no evidence to officially crucify him. So as a result, he's felt held back in his career as well. One night though, Rick Dalton discovers that Sharon Tate, played by Margot Robbie, lives next door to him with her husband Roman Polanski, who's like the hottest movie producer in the business right now. So he's thinking in his head, hey, if I can befriend them, maybe Roman Polanski can help relaunch my career. He can help me get started again. That right there is the general gist of this movie, and now I'll get into more of the stuff as I go along, but let me start off what I immediately love about this movie. Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt both absolutely crush it in this movie. They had unbelievable chemistry with each other in this movie. I really bought the friendship. I love seeing the way they talk to each other. I love seeing the way they banter back and forth. You really buy their friendship. You buy the professionalism between one another. And DiCaprio and Pitt both gave excellent performances. I think they could both be up for Oscars for this movie. And of course, the writing in this movie is awesome. You know, the dialogue between characters, it feels real, it feels authentic. But where I definitely give this movie credit is the humor that is in the writing, because this movie is a comedy. You look at most Tarantino movies, they all have funny moments in them, they all have comedy in them. But this was the first one that he's made that is straight up a comedy. And it's a great comedy. This movie is really funny, hilarious at times even. His timing of certain jokes, the way he builds up to certain jokes, sometimes they do take a little while to get going, but I will say, when the jokes do hit in this movie, they really do hit. So I gotta give credit for that. I will say though, that is maybe something that may be hard for some Tarantino fans to accept, maybe even appreciate, because this is very different from what a lot of Tarantino movie genres have been like. Most of them have been crime movies or westerns or anything along those lines, anything that encourages, you know, violence. For the majority of this movie, it's really not at all like that. And as a result, fans who are used to what we have gone from Tarantino may not like this different take. Like a lot of Tarantino movies though, this movie does have a bunch of different storylines that kind of intertwine together along the way. Notably, different storylines that revolve around the three main characters, I could say, being DiCaprio, Pitt, and Margot Robbie. Get to Leonardo DiCaprio's storyline, he's been casted in a new Western TV series, he's been brought on to play the bad guy, you know, he's trying to make his way through that, he's trying to revitalize his career, he's trying to show the world his range again. And what I really appreciate seeing in this storyline with DiCaprio is the production that goes into making a show like this. It's really cool seeing DiCaprio and some of the other actors just act out a certain scene, the way it would look in a movie like this, but then in the background the movie could just pan over, the camera I should say, should pan over to the director and the crew, and they'll yell cut or action or whatever it is. But what I appreciate is when the certain scene is happening, when certain characters are talking and enacting a scene, it felt very authentic. It felt like you're just watching a movie. You don't feel like it's a set happening. You really feel like that scene is just what's happening right now. I appreciated that. You could tell this movie really was, in fact, meant to be a love letter to classic cinema like Quentin Tarantino intended it to. I really like seeing what Rick Dalton is doing within the scene right here. You know, there are times he's struggling to remember a line, you know, he's struggling to maybe give the best performance that he can give, and he's just eating away at him, and at one point he just goes into his trailer and he just completely flips shit at himself because he's so pissed off. It's just, it leads to a really funny moment. It's kind of funny seeing Leo DiCaprio just have a breakdown. In Leo's storyline though, I really want to give props to the child actress. I believe her name is Julia Butters. I just looked her up right before I did this review. But I really want to give her props because she was excellent in this movie. She plays this child actress that stars opposite Leonardo DiCaprio in this TV series that they're filming, and I really appreciated the job that she had. Her character is... she's not like a lot of little girl actresses, I guess you could say. You know, she's not like your stereotypical little girl, you know. The way she talks is really just... she's really smart, she's wise beyond her years. She's able to have like a real legitimate conversation with Leo about what it means to be an actor, what it means to have a role, what it means to be in a show or a movie or anything that requires this kind of production. She goes on this tangent about how whenever she's on set for something that she's filming or something she's a part of, she always goes by her character's name, she always speaks with her character's accent, like she will do everything she can to maintain her character because for her, that's how she's going to give the best performance that she can give. It's just not the kind of writing or the kind of dialogue you expect to come from a little girl in a movie like this, but I was really impressed by it. She was able to really go toe-to-toe with DiCaprio in terms of acting, and that's really impressive. The movie also eventually shifts over to Brad Pitt's storyline, and we see a little bit more about what his life is about. And he lives a pretty simple life for someone who's a stunt double. You know, obviously you have Rick Dalton, who's, the actor, the guy who lives the fame and the fortune and everything like that. Cliff Booth as a stunt double, he lives a pretty quiet life, you know. He's a military veteran, I should say. He lives in a trailer with his pit bull, and, you know, when he's not doing stunt doubles, he's just living about a normal life. We do get one flashback scene of seeing what a little bit of his work was like as a stunt double, and for one of the sets that they were on, he was working with Bruce Lee, and Bruce Lee is talking about how, like, you know, oh, my fists are dangerous weapons. If I kill you accidentally, I go to jail. And Brad Pitt pulls a hole. It's like, if anyone accidentally kills someone, they'll go to jail because that's manslaughter. I mean, you see that in the trailer, but in the movie, Bruce Lee gets all serious, like he's gonna school Cliff Booth, and he's like, I want you to fight me. He's like, just hit me, you know? And what ends up happening is Cliff Booth basically ends up kicking the shit out of Bruce Lee. The two of them get into like a little sparring lash, but Cliff Booth is literally just throwing him all over the set of the Green Hornet. At one point, he just takes out the guy's car with Bruce Lee, and, you know, that gets him fired off the set. But I'm sitting there like, holy shit, Cliff Booth just fucked up Bruce Lee, who at one point fucked up Chuck Norris. So technically, does that mean Cliff Booth is more badass than Chuck Norris? Things you gotta think about. Oh boy, now all the Chuck Norris fanatics are gonna come at me now. Guys, I love Chuck Norris. I'm just saying. If you watch this movie, you know what I'm talking about. After that flashback, though, we see Cliff Booth picking up a hitchhiker. He brings her back to this ranch that she's staying at. When he arrives there, though, Cliff Booth sees this hippie girl reunite with all her hippie friends. We're all just kind of chilling on the property. but he's able to recognize the property as a former movie set that he was once on, and he's like, hey, this was owned by a guy. I wouldn't be surprised if he was still here. I want to go see if he's around. He eventually goes and he meets with the guy who's played by Bruce Dern. He had to get past all these hippies who were kind of giving him shit, really didn't want him to see him, which has him believing that they're taking advantage of him. But, and he meets him, and, he's this really old, blind man. He's basically telling, Cliff Booth to just fuck off, but Cliff Booth is still thinking in his head. He's like, there's something off about this place. Soon enough, you see all the hippies just gather around each other. He's like, quick, get Tex and tell him to tell Charlie what's going on, which, I'm gonna tell you right now, for me, for a little while, I didn't know what that meant. I'll get more into that later on as the movie goes, but didn't know what they were talking about. We do get this one awesome moment, though. Brad Pitt's just about to leave, and he notices one of the hippies just stuck a knife into the tire of his car. And the hippie thinks he's hot shit because he did that. He's like, Brad Pitt's like, okay, you're gonna fix that. And the hippie's just like, oh, eat me. And Brad Pitt's like, oh, okay. And he just, beats the absolute shit out of this guy. He's like, okay, now you're gonna fix it. I will say, though, getting into some of the flaws I did have with this movie, as this scene was going on, at the time, I was sitting there, I'm just like, what's the point of this? Where is this going, really? That's definitely a flaw that I can understand some people having with this movie, is the fact that when you watch it, at times you're really not so sure where it's going. It doesn't really have a clear path to it, the storyline anyway. Look at every Tarantino movie. Some of them have maybe a simpler plot than others, but along the way, you were able to figure out where everything was going, the direction that these movies were going in. This movie, though, you're kind of sitting there for a little while and you're just like, okay, where exactly is this going? As a result, because it doesn't make you as fully engaged with the story as maybe you'd like to be, it does make it feel like the movie's dragging on a little bit. I feel like this is further emphasized with Margot Robbie's storyline as Sharon Tate. Because really, what's one of the other disappointments that I did have with this movie is Margot Robbie didn't have as big a role as I thought she would. The way the trailers made it out, the way the marketing made it out, it seemed like she was going to be as big of a role in this movie as Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt. I thought there would be like a trifecta for this movie. Really, when you watch it, it's DiCaprio and Pitt. They carry this movie. Margot Robbie is there as Sharon Tate because you realize as the movie goes on, she's actually very important to the story. But there's a moment, really it's throughout the movie, but it's especially in the second act, where you really get a lot of focus on her, but really, when it focuses on her, not much really happens storyline-wise. You see Sharon Tate at a few parties, you see her doing some shopping around town. At one point she goes to watch herself in one of the movies that she's in. But as far as Sharon Tate went as a character for this movie, that's really all she does. She's not like a very memorable character in this movie. I understand why she's in it now that I've learned more about what this movie is loosely based off of, but it doesn't change the fact that at the time, I'm sitting there, I'm just like, what was the point of having her in here? I mean, I get the point of her being here, but what was the point of, I guess, making it out like she was going to have such a big role to it? Margot Robbie's role in this movie was very minor, and when she was in the movie, it did make the movie slow down, which is a bit of a drag, because I will say, the first act of this movie is awesome, it's great, it's awesome to learn about Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt, seeing their friendship, seeing what they've gone through, seeing their careers. Then the second act comes along, and between Brad Pitt's storyline, where you're not really sure where that's going, and the stuff going on with Sharon Tate, you're kind of like, alright, where's this going? It's kind of dragging a little bit, or it feels like it's dragging. And now I'll get to the third and final act of this movie, because just like the first act, this was awesome, especially the ending. The ending just, oh my gosh, the ending of this movie is so fucking great that it's almost good enough to make you completely forget about any of the flaws that you did have with this movie. Like, that's how fucking great it was. In fact, you know what, I'm just gonna get right to that, because I really want to talk about it, because I love the ending of this movie. I love it. A few years have passed now. Rick Dalton finally took up the advice from Al Pacino. He decided to start, filming in some Italian movies, to try to revitalize his career a little bit, which it has. He's now come back to America, because that's still his main focus. They're all just hanging out at his place. He has a new wife. Cliff Booth is there with them, with his dog. But you realize, on this night, and I didn't really know too much about it. My friend and I actually didn't really realize it until after the movie. We were talking about the movie, and we did a little more digging into it. On this night, in, history, this was the night the Manson family came and murdered Sharon Tate. I'll be honest with you guys, I didn't know too much about the Manson family. I didn't really know too much about Sharon Tate. I mean, that's all kind of before my time. Maybe I'm ignorant, maybe I'm an idiot for not really knowing too much about it. But just being honest with you guys, I didn't know too much behind it. So even when this scene happened and all these hippies came to, you know, this neighborhood, at first I thought maybe they wanted revenge against Brad Pitt for, you know, beating the shit out of the hippie who put the hole in his tie earlier. But once I figured out that they were actually the Manson family and what their true intent was, you finally realize in hindsight, like, oh shit, so shit was gonna go down tonight. Like, this was the night that shit was gonna really happen. But again, in Quentin Tarantino fashion, what he will do, similar to Inglourious Bastards, is he will take a historical event, a well-known historical event, and he'll do a little tweaking to it, he'll make a few changes to it, and he'll put his little take on it. Oftentimes it has absolutely nothing to do with what actually happened, but for the movie anyway, it's always awesome. On this night, the Manson family comes to this neighborhood because their intent was to murder Sharon Tate. At one point, their engine's like revving too loud. Leonardo DiCaprio storms out and he like screams at them, he's yelling at them. They start to drive away, they start to back out. And one of the girls in the back, one of the hippies there, she's all like, let's just kill all the actors in this neighborhood. Let's just make them all suffer. Let's murder them all. They all promote violence in the shit that they make. So let's show them what the consequences of that can be like. And they decide, alright, we're gonna go kill the guy who yelled at us first. We'll go into his house and we'll kill whoever's in there. Except at this point, Brad Pitt has returned from his acid-tripping walk with his dog. And it's really funny seeing the confrontation that he has with these hippies when they come in with their knives drawn, just ready to just kill. Brad Pitt's just high out of his mind right now, and it's just so funny. He's just like, hey, I know you. I know you too. You were the guy. You were at that ranch, and I got the gun pointed at me like, I see what you're doing here. Except these hippies fail to realize that Cliff Booth was apparently the most badass stunt double ever. And he's also trained his dog very efficiently, because what happens next? Hippies all their knives drawn, they're ready to kill Cliff Booth, ready to kill Rick Dalton's wife, ready to kill him when they find him, but all Cliff Booth does is just whistle, and his pit bull just attacks the ever-living shit out of two of the hippies there. This is where the Quentin Tarantino violence really sets in, because these people, these hippies, they fucking suffer. Cliff's dog just attacks the leader of the hippies. She attacks that guy first, and she just like rips his balls off, just makes him bleed out, just like completely fucks him up entirely. Then she attacks one of the girls, again, absolutely just fucks her up, like to the point of being unrecognizable, like her eyes are gouged out, she can't see, she's bleeding everywhere, it's so fucking bad. Then Brad Pitt just starts squaring off with the other hippie girl. At one point she stabs him in the leg, and he just takes her, and he just like starts bashing her head against the fireplace. You just hear like her bones cracking from being just smashed against the fucking stone wall. It's just got you sitting there like, what the fuck? Oh shit! Oh fuck! Oh my god! Oh. Oh shit! Quentin Tarantino violence, man, it's just the best. Maybe that makes me a sick, morbid fuck, but it's just awesome. Icing on the cake of the whole fucking scene, though. At one point, the girl who got blinded, who just got basically almost mauled to shit by the dog, she just runs outside. She's just like running around with her knife everywhere. She can't see shit. She falls into the pool. Leonardo DiCaprio sees her. And what he decides to do, a very old role that he had, you might remember it from the trailer, you know, he was given a flamethrower, and he came in, you know, he fried a bunch of Nazis. Well, it turns out, he kept that flamethrower, he walks out with said flamethrower, and he just burns the girl alive and just kills her that way. So, I guess you could say, in this take on history by Quentin Tarantino, two guys named Rick Dalton and Cliff Booth saved Sharon Tate by killing the hippies that were gonna kill her. I just love that ending so much. I love that it gave some more of a clarity to who the hippies were that, you know, Brad Pitt had run into. I love how it also gave more of an explanation to why Margot Robbie as Sharon Tate was in this movie as much as she was, because of what eventually did happen to her, and why it gave this ending a lot more relevance. Yeah, the movie wraps up. Cliff Booth has to go to the hospital because, you know, he got stabbed in the leg. He's gonna get that taken care of. But Rick Dalton, at this point, he finally gets to have a talk with Sharon Tate's husband, the movie producer, And, you know, he explains what was going on, how, you know, oh yeah, a bunch of hippies came into the house, they were going to kill us, but we were able to get rid of them. And, you know, the man's like, oh, hey, you're Rick Dolan. My wife, Sharon Tate, she's a huge fan of yours. You want to come in for a drink? We could talk about something? And Rick Dolan's like, yeah, alright, sure, I'll come right in. And, you know, Sharon Tate greets him, you know, they all go inside for a drink, and that's where the movie wraps up. But all in all, I will say this. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, it was a different kind of Quentin Tarantino movie, but I still thought it was awesome. Leonardo DiCaprio, Brad Pitt both gave excellent performances in this movie. I really love the way they worked well with each other. I really love seeing their friendship. I love seeing them reflect on the work they've done together. I love seeing just how they hung out together. Even with one scene in particular, when they're just watching an old movie and you hear them talking about it, I really connected with it because it's something that me and my friends will do all the time. We'll watch a movie and we'll talk about it, we'll reflect on it. I loved seeing how real their friendship was, and that's credit that goes to Pitt and DiCaprio as actors. The writing in this movie is great. It may not be as tension-filled as Quentin Tarantino movies have been. This one definitely goes for a little bit more of the comedy in this one, but the comedy in this movie really did work. The dialogue is great. There's some really funny moments, some hilarious moments that really had me laughing my ass off. I like how it does take the route of all these storylines and eventually connect with each other. I like it being Quentin Tarantino's take on a historical event. There are times where you do feel a little antsy because you're not sure where the movie's going. It does feel a little bit slow. Like I said, the scenes with Sharon Tate, those kind of dragged for me because although I understood her importance to the movie now, I still feel maybe she could have had a bit of a reduced role, or at least not given so much of a focus, because it did make the movie drag when that did happen. The ending of this movie, though, is fucking awesome. It's such a great final act. It's the exact way you wrap up a movie. I've always said this before. If a movie has an awesome ending, that can be enough to make you look past the flaws that you do have with the movie. It can be enough to walk out of there feeling really satisfied. In the end, although I can't ignore the flaws I did have with this movie, and although I will say it's not quite up there with movies like Pulp Fiction and Kill Bill and Django Unchained, you know, some of my favorite Tarantino movies, this is still an awesome movie. I'm very happy I saw it, and it is a welcomed addition to Quentin Tarantino's film history, I guess I could say that. I love this movie. It was great. So that's all I'm gonna say, guys. Thank you so much for watching my video. Don't forget to leave a comment, like, subscribe. I will see you all next time.